Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Classroom podcast with OnCourse. On today's podcast, we have Ayush Jain. Ayush is now a rising junior at Duke University, and he is majoring in math and computer science with a minor in finance. Hi, Ayush. Welcome to the podcast. How's everything going?
Pretty good, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while since I've seen you. But how are things at Duke? How have your first 2 years been on campus?
Pretty great, I would say. Right now, I'm in my second summer at Duke, as you mentioned. But yeah, it's been pretty great the past 2 years. The first year was definitely, I would say my 2 years at Duke were very different because I spent my first year settling in. I would say I took longer than a lot of other people to settle in and, just find things that I wanted to do, find people that I wanted to spend time with. But I would say that was most of my first year, just learning how to be a college student, essentially living on your own, just navigating through classes. And the second year, I mean, first year was great as well, obviously, but the second year was a blast. Had some of the greatest experiences I've had so far my past year, and yeah, honestly, it's just been a pretty great experience so far. It still feels surreal because, it's just a while ago. I was still in high school, kind of thinking about, oh, it would be so great if I was at Duke. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's been surreal for sure.
that's awesome. And you're halfway done, which is good evidence of time flying in this case. Um, so that's pretty interesting. What do you feel? Maybe in your first year that took you a little bit longer to settle in. Do you feel like you were staying in your room too much, or do you feel like you weren't involved in too many activities? What was it?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of both of those, honestly. I would say my first semester, I was not really obsessed, but I just kind of had this constant idea that I had to still stay in touch with people from back home, like call my friends back home every
Hmm.
day, things like that, essentially. It kind of felt like I was at Duke, but I was still living in Bombay. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was definitely weird. I think that was one aspect of it. And I think the second aspect of it is just meeting a lot of new people, right? Obviously, I hadn't really had a lot of friends from all over the world or even the US for that matter until I entered college.
Hmm.
And at least for Duke, right? I would say there's diversity, but at the same time, there aren't that many Indians, right? So it was definitely a bit of a transition. Getting settled in was tough because
Yeah.
of that. And I think the second aspect of it, more than activities, was just learning how to live by myself, which I think is something that a lot of people aren't really equipped to do until you actually start doing it, and then you start figuring it out, and you're like, oh, how do I do this, right? Like, how do I do my own laundry? How do I like keep my room clean, get
Yeah.
food, go grocery shopping, just things like that. In general, were pretty hard the first 2 semesters for me.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I guess these are the kinds of things which usually parents fret about more because they know their kids have never done that before going to college. Um, but I think that first year is important. You kind of figure all that stuff out. You get into your second year, and not only are you more familiar with the campus and the country and your city, but you're also more familiar with living by yourself. Which not many people talk about. So that's a really good point, because we get a lot of people who we've sent to college in their first year, especially the ones who are a little more in touch with us. They all call and they wonder whether this is how it's supposed to be. They also especially in that first um, come towards the end of that first year, they all wonder whether you get that little bit of depression, and then by the second year it all disappears. So that's definitely a good point you've made. What do you feel like you did differently in your second year?
I feel like there were a lot of things. I think towards the end of my first year, honestly, itself, I started. I think second semester onwards, actually, I
Mm.
started getting involved in more activities around campus, whether it was, well, the pre-professional clubs like Consulting Club, for example, or the Duke Impact Investing Group, right?
Yeah.
Clubs like that were great because not only did they help me become more professional, but I think more than that, they introduced me to a lot of new people. And I think that was super cool. I think second semester, when I started getting involved with more activities like that, just around campus, I met a bunch of new people, and I think that helped me a lot because not only did it anchor me a little more to Duke, because as I said, I spoke about like this like transitory state where I
Yeah.
was half in Bombay, half at Duke, right? But I think just finding people, finding communities at Duke really helped anchor me to the college and really appreciate it a lot more because I wanted to spend time with them rather than calling one of my best friends back home, for example, right? So I think going out there and actually exploring new clubs is it definitely helped me a lot. And I will also say I think a lot of kids coming out of Bombay underestimate just how much grit and competitiveness they have compared to a lot of people abroad, right? I think I didn't really quite realize it until I started trying out for clubs and like just like doing things like that, where I realized, oh, like people people in Bombay actually just have that innate grit in them in a sense. So yeah, I think that was super helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's an India thing in a way.
Yeah.
I guess we're used to so many things being wrong that we're pretty accepting of most other things. But
Yeah.
but no, that's good to know that your second year was a big sort of improvement on your first. And I guess in a way, Duke is one of those schools which has a lot going on. Of course, academically, it's one of the highest ranked schools, but they also have big sporting traditions. They also have
Yeah.
fraternities and sororities on campus. Have you been to any games? Did you think about pledging any fraternities? What have talk to me about some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Sporting culture is huge at Duke, and probably also one of the reasons why I wanted to come to Duke. But
Yeah,
yeah, I would say sporting culture is very intense, especially in spring semester, because Duke is a huge basketball school. Obviously, we're good at other sports too, but basketball's one of the things that everyone just goes crazy for, right? For example, we have this thing called tenting essentially, where Duke UNC is probably one of the biggest college basketball games, if not the biggest college basketball game in the
yeah.
US. And people tent outside the stadium in a line in the freezing cold for like 10 weeks just to get entry into the game. And I think that in itself is insane. I didn't personally tent, but I did go for a lot of games my freshman year. Sophomore year, a little less, partly because our team was worse and partly because of time. But yeah, I think just being in that, just being in Cameron, the basketball stadium,
Yeah.
it's electrifying. But there's the student section of it is just it's crazy. It's just everyone standing up, chanting the entire time, just cheering the team on, and it's really something that's not I can't even describe it. It's just an electrifying atmosphere overall, and it beats any other athletic atmosphere that I've been in, I would say. And I think talking a little bit about fraternities and sororities and stuff. In a fraternity, I joined freshman spring. I do think also one of the things that really helped me find new communities and new people was joining a fraternity.
Mm.
And I do think that Greek life does play, it does play a significant role at Duke. I would say a lot of social life is, I wouldn't say centered around Greek life, but there always are events happening on campus which involve Greek life, right? Whether it's a mixer with another sorority, for example, or even just a fundraising event on campus. We have this thing called Shave and Buzz, where essentially you just put up things on social media, right? Like, oh, like if I reach like $1,000 in donations, I will do something embarrassing, right? Like I'll streak around campus in Chick-fil-A shorts for a day. This was an actual thing we had to do, but yeah, it's great because at the end of it, everyone in the fraternity just like shaves the head, and the proceeds go to a cancer foundation, and then the hair is also used to make wigs, right? So things like that, and just parties and stuff as well. I would say it's not the sort of thing where you need to be in a frat or sorority to have a good time at Duke. I'm not implying that whatsoever, but at the same time, it is great to find that community of people and have something. I think it's pretty arbitrary, right? Like just have a couple of Greek letters and decide like, oh, we're all brothers and stuff. Like I still make a lot of fun of just Greek system in general, but
Hmm.
I still think it's insanely cool just having something like that bonding you.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I feel like there's that sort of almost an assurance that you feel socially that, if, for example, you have to go to dinner, you never have to think twice about going with a group of people. You won't have to eat alone. Maybe you want to go into the city or something like that. You want to do some shopping, you need to watch a show, something like that. You always have company. So I feel like outside of being in the frat, outside of being involved in their events, there's plenty of those benefits. There's also, of course, the argument that being in a fraternity or being in a sorority can help you from a networking perspective when you're looking at internships or jobs. Have you seen any of that materialize yet, or is that maybe something you're looking at for the next 2 years?
Absolutely. No, I think that's another big advantage of a fraternity because I think it's super cool. I had this experience a couple of weeks ago itself, actually. I was just interviewing for a place and, they had my resume, whatever. There's probably a line in there mentioning that I'm in like XYZ fraternity, right? It was super cool because I just hopped on the call with my interviewer. I was just talking about my life, and the interviewer was talking about, oh, like I was in this frat as well in this college, and obviously there's like common like just like gestures or things like that which you have among fraternity members, and I think that was super cool. It definitely helped us connect, right? It was someone from completely different college, completely different generation, someone I don't
Yeah.
know whatsoever, but it still helped me. And after that, they introduced me to other people from the company who they also knew were in that frat, right? And I think that was super cool. And I think even recruiting for a job in, well, I mean, the generic example of like finance or consulting, for example, right? I would say networking has been much easier given that I'm in a fraternity, because it's very easy to just hit up upperclassmen that I know from my fraternity and be like, hey, like, I know that you're working at this company or that you're doing this. I want to learn more about it, and can you introduce me to more people? And they're always more than happy to help. I think that's one of the great things, the fact that that brotherhood does run very deep, and it definitely does permeate professional. It permeates through professional experiences as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's good that you're sort of getting the most out of this socially and professionally at this point. Maybe you'll get much more of it now, as you get into your upperclassmen years. And the other thing is you'll also now become that person for somebody younger. So
Yeah.
maybe the incoming freshmen, maybe in the rising sophomores, they might see you now as that networking point. So it works both ways, and I guess that's what keeps these things going as well. Um, so that's nice to hear that you've found that integration. Let's actually switch to the academic side right now.
Mhm.
So I know from working with you that you're always looking at math. You always had that interest in CS. What do you feel about doing two majors at Duke? Is that super rigorous? Is that something you feel because they're similar to each other, you can manage easily?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge. It's rigorous. That's not like there's no doubt about that whatsoever. There is a bit of overlap though. I will say Duke does make it slightly easier because like they have a lot of combinations like this, right? And it can be a
Hmm.
completely random combination. I know friends doing CS philosophy double majors as well, where Duke is kind of helping them with that integration, right? Even though it's like two completely different, you would think two completely different fields, but there are still commonalities and
Yeah.
integrations that help cut out classes. But yeah, I think it is a rigorous course load. It's very quantitative, right? But I think the two things which make it easier is the fact that a theoretically I can do four classes every semester, which is like just a normal course load. I can do four classes every semester and still be done with math and CS in 2.5, maybe 3 years, right? If I took just math and CS classes, obviously for the sake of the argument,
Yeah.
I can still finish in 2.5, 3 years pretty easily.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because, as I said, a lot of common classes, and it's not that bad, right? It's very doable. And I think the second part of it is that I still appreciate the fact that it doesn't have very stringent gen ed requirements, right? The way that it works at Duke is that classes have codes attached to them, so you could have a class which has like an ALP code attached to it, which is like arts, literature, and performances, right? And it would be a class about, like, let's say, I took a class about architecture in Berlin in the 1900s, for example, right? Got an ALP code for that. So with things like that, even though it's not a very stringent requirement, it still helps you do classes and kind of ease that quantitative workload. I would
Yeah.
say I usually aim to do one math class and one or two CS classes in a semester, and then have one or maybe two classes which are just a cool class that I want to do. For example, right? I'm super into things like psychology, art, architecture, things like that. I find it super cool. So just doing classes like that also kind of helps lessen that load, I would say.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I feel like, especially a lot of parents don't really know so well how the US system works.
Yeah.
But, the students find out when they actually get to college. Um, and there's plenty of room, especially, in a US undergraduate education, there's plenty of room to take all those electives you really want and have enough space to do two majors without yeah, it's a lot of hard work, no doubting that, but you won't feel like you're absolutely killing yourself over it. So I think that's good. That's a good point, to have spoken about. It's a
Hmm.
good example of also how you can combine math and CS and finish those due to a lot of overlaps. So that's very interesting. I remember, when you were applying to college, and I think the year before that, you had worked on a paper related to roulette.
Hmm.
I thought that was a pretty cool paper. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think let's see, where did the inspiration for that come from? Actually, it was because of a book that I read called Alex's Adventures in Numberland. Yeah,
Hmm.
sounds super geeky, I know, whatever. But yeah, it was just this book that I was reading at the time, and it had like a bunch of mathematical concepts. And one of the things they spoke about was gambling mathematics. And I found that super fascinating because, again, I wasn't super into poker, roulette, or just games like that, but I still found it pretty. I found it pretty cool. But yeah, my paper essentially just examined gambling mathematics. From what I remember, I think for the first couple sections of it, it was very exploratory, just kind of explaining how the system, the gambling system, works, casinos is it's geared against you, right? Like mathematically, you're always gonna the casino's always gonna win mathematically, right? That's just how the game works. But the second part of it was more interesting because I did a little bit of a deep dive into roulette. Roulette is actually a sport with a long history, and it has a lot of variations as well. But what I was examining in particular was how you can actually beat the system and win at roulette, right? Bit of a spoiler alert, even after all that investigation, your chances of coming out of it a richer man are still pretty abysmal. But yeah, it was cool because there was this strategy that I'd read about vaguely, probably seen a YouTube video on it as well at some point. Just one of those like YouTube rabbit hole days, right? But yeah, it was about this thing called the Martingale strategy, essentially that well, I don't want to go too much on technicals of it, but it was just the sort of thing where, oh, if I bet $1 and I lose that $1, I bet $2, and then win back my original sum plus a dollar more, right? Like I'm doubling
Yeah.
my reward every time. That was kind of the basis for it. But yeah, it was a super cool paper because it was one of the first times that I actually just read up about something or saw something and decided, oh, like let me explore this more. Let me just read up about it and write a little more about it. I also integrated some code into it just for simulations, and I think that was one of the first times I actually saw that intersectionality between CS and math and
Yeah.
realized,
Yeah.
oh, oh wow, like yeah, hey, this is super cool. I can use computer science to do mathematical research or vice versa. And I think that was definitely one of the things that did kind of nudge me towards doing CS and math in college as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that, I mean, that's exactly the sort of paper that, shows you to be a good fit for those courses that you now are majoring in. Um, and that's basically what it is. Once you start studying it at a higher level, you realize that, math is the core subject. And then CS almost allows you to scale that math, and make, the basic algorithm that you've built, make that a little more convenient for different cases. So I feel like, yeah, that's absolutely, what you're doing now with your two majors. So, good stuff. And that was a really fun paper for me to have seen as well, when you were applying. So, thanks a bunch, Ayush, for talking to us about, a lot of these things, in terms of your experience at Duke. Before we go, let's do a few quick fire questions. Okay, let's go with, describe your experience at Duke in 3 words.
Let's see. Confusing, passionate, and I would say homely now. Yeah.
Fantastic. I guess that's what it almost becomes. You're confused, you
Yeah.
have the passion, then it feels like home. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, what's the best class you've taken at Duke so far?
Oh, hands down, my freshman year class, cognitive psychology. We intro to cognitive psychology. We had this whack professor who was always just talking about doing psychedelics. It was crazy. Yeah,
Fantastic. I guess it's the professors that make these classes most of the time, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Solid. Okay, what's your favorite place to spend time on the Duke campus?
Oh, Duke Gardens, 100%. Just a random sunny day, just take my blanket out, go to Duke Gardens, get a football out. It's great.
Fantastic. Okay, what is your favorite thing to eat at Duke?
Ooh, this is a really tough one. I'm a serial Panera eater, but that's not a not a good thing. So
Bread and
yeah,
cheese.
probably Panera. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, and last one. Was there any misconceptions that you had about college or the US or anything along those lines which changed when you went there?
Yeah, I definitely thought that I would be called a curry muncher at least once. Wasn't called a curry muncher even once. It was it was great. But yeah, all jokes aside, it was definitely more welcoming and diverse than I initially thought it would be. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So I guess I'll go ahead and end the session here. Thank you so much, Ayush. In class. And yeah, we'll be happy to see you in the office. So, anyway, thank you and take care.
thank you. Take care.